Welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. My name's Lauren DeMoss. I'm here with Matthew Roberts. We're both healthcare attorneys with Maynard Nexsen, and we're coming to you live from SCbio's 2025 annual conference. It's one of the Southeast's premier life sciences event featuring cutting-edge presentations and regional life science leaders. And we're thrilled to have with us today Kendalle O'Connell. She's the president and CEO of MassBio, which, as many know, is a powerhouse in life sciences organization that serves as a driving force behind Massachusetts' life sciences ecosystem, which is booming. Kendalle, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Can you start us off by telling us kind of the mission of MassBio as well as your background as president and CEO?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here today. So MassBio is actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. So we were actually the first biotechnology trade organization in the world. Wow. And our mission is to advance Massachusetts leadership in the life sciences, grow the industry, bring value to the healthcare system, and most importantly, to improve patient lives. As you mentioned, we have over 1,700 member companies. So think of everything from your smallest startup, largest biopharma, and everything in between, law firms, accounting firms, everything that sort of makes this ecosystem work. I've actually been at the organization for a long time. I'll be 17 years this year. And worn every hat in the organization. I have the great privilege of now being the president and CEO. And we talked about this before, but I was a lawyer, practicing lawyer before that.
Yes.
Congratulations,
recovering
yes, on the
yes,
news.
Indeed.
Yes. So Massachusetts is clearly sort of the pinnacle of life sciences ecosystem. You got probably the most active life sciences industry in that state. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to pass and how you are trying to continue to maintain that top spot as a life sciences ecosystem?
My time at MassBio sort of has run in parallel to much of the growth that we've seen in Massachusetts. So we actually currently have over 1,000 biotechs in Massachusetts. Wow. 18 of the top 20 biopharma have a physical presence in Massachusetts. When you think about all of the stakeholders, you need to have a successful ecosystem, right? We talk about this all the time, but you need that innovation. You need big pharma. You need the investor community, right? So we have over 380 active funds and over 500 VCs in Massachusetts. Wow. Of course, our world-class academic institutions, over 120 academic institutions in Massachusetts, and our best-in-class hospital system. So we had all of these ingredients. But I think the real catalyst for much of the growth that we've experienced was government. So they came in and they infused a bunch of capital specifically into life sciences. So they created what's known as the Life Science Initiative. So that was a 10-year $1 billion investment into the life sciences back in 2008. And when you look, you can really correlate that investment to the growth of the industry. Since that time period, we've grown by 114% in employment. So yet we have over 117,000 individuals just in biopharma. And when you throw in med device or digital health, that's well over 150,000 folks. The industry contributes over $35 billion per year to our GDP. Wow. So big industry. How do we keep it that way? Yes. That's the second part of this question, right? Yes. And I think like anything, there's a fragility to it. If you don't continue to cultivate and invest, it could go away at any time. Fortunately, we just got the third version of the Life Science Initiative passed. So another 10 years and $1 billion investment.
Well, I presume that was a little easier to pass this time than the first.
Funny enough, it wasn't. It actually didn't make it out of regular session. So the leaders, our speaker, Senate president, and the governor had to go back in a special session to get it passed because I think the thought was, look, we've built this industry. We're at the top of our game. Why don't we take a similar model in other industries like clean energy and others? And we were like, no, we've got to continue to invest here, right? And we've got to make sure companies are moving here, can start here and scale here.
Right.
When you think about opportunity areas for Massachusetts, specifically biomanufacturing, not unlike South Carolina, actually. There's a lot of similarities with where South Carolina is right now that I see to where Massachusetts was 15, 16, 17 years ago. You've got that momentum. You've got partners in government that understand that this is an opportunity industry for you and making that investment.
Wow.
You know,
Makes
speaking
sense.
of growth and development, I'd like to talk a little bit about MassBio Drive, the accelerator program, kind of how that started and maybe successes that Massachusetts has seen from it.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite programs that we run at MassBio, and it's such a privilege to be able to see this program grow here in South Carolina and hopefully other regions. So we ran an accelerator for 10 years before this. It was called Mass Connect. And back in, I guess, 2020, 2021, I was like, I think this program has aged out. I think it's gotten a little stale. It's not meeting the needs of the market anymore. Let's tear it down and rebuild it. But let's do a market analysis, see what accelerators are out there, where are there gaps, and where can we sort of fill that void. And so when we built the program, we launched our first cohort in 2022. And actually, since then, we've graduated 31 companies.
Wow.
They've raised over $41 million, which was shocking to me because think of this. This is the toughest seed market that I've ever experienced.
It's brutal.
So pretty incredible that we've seen that much momentum. They've also created 95 jobs. So think about this, truly contributing to not just changing patients' lives, but to the economy as well. So we were really, when we thought about the program, we're like, okay, we want to make sure companies know what to expect in this program too. So that preset curriculum is awesome because not only are the companies paired with mentors that can intimately get to know their respective company, but now they have access to experts like yourselves. And then 2 free weeks. What do you need? What do you want to focus on? I think we've really hit all the right notes with the program and seeing how quickly momentum has built here on the South Carolina version of it as well. They're running their second cohort right now. They've, had so many more applications this time than they did last time. So, and I think the thing about the program is we're finding science from all around the country and all around the world, which is really exciting to me. Good science happens everywhere, right? And if you can take that and then support it with a backbone like what we have in Boston, you can really make a difference and accelerate that timeline.
Yeah.
Well, as a South Carolinian, I want to thank you for exporting MassBio Drive to South Carolina with the SCbio Drive, which, as you referenced, Maynard Nexsen got to participate as a mentor in the IP and legal, and just personally experiencing it, it was terrific.
I love hearing that.
I appreciate your leadership. But how did it come about? Were you talking to James and just said, hey, this has been great for us. You ought to try it? I mean, that was pretty generous of you to come up with this concept. How did it come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, at MassBio, I told you we're 40 years old. We're a mature organization, and we're really fortunate to have a lot of resources. And we happen to have not just resources at MassBio, but obviously our ecosystem, right? And so we wanted to take a big tent approach. So when we started our program in 2022, it was really, how can we broaden our reach and pull science from wherever it was happening? Actually, only about 40 of the companies that are run in our program are from Massachusetts. And so we partnered with SCbio around our purchasing consortium. We run a pretty big purchasing consortium. So that's where the relationship started. But as I got to know James and Aaron and the team, it was clear they were hungry for opportunities. So it was like, let's roll up our sleeves and dip our toe in here, because this is where it will make real impact. How do you catalyze what's happening here in South Carolina? Well, you have to have a strong early stage company ecosystem, but you got to start building that now. So I think it's worked really, really well. And again, just having that big tent approach, if we can unlock what we have in Massachusetts to help science, no matter where it's happening, well, who wins? Patients win at the end of the day.
What were some of the lessons that you learned as MassBio sort of emerged and grew over the last 17 years you've been there? Were there some lessons you learned of relationships with the government, relationships with the industry, things that maybe didn't work that states like South Carolina would have to look at and sort of be wary of as they try to expand their ecosystem?
Yeah, I think getting everyone sort of on the same playbook is hugely important, right? And that's also really, really hard. But having that investment and partnership from government is truly critical, right? And actually, I've seen, I know Ashley Teasdale, and she's really, really keen on this industry and has been hugely supportive. In
huge partner.
And
in this
what
effort.
I think is really interesting there is she's very willing to think outside the box and be creative. So maybe you don't have $1 billion investment like we are fortunate to have in Massachusetts, but you're thinking really creatively and proactively on how you can support these small companies, how you can make sure they can get to bio and access partnering opportunities, how you can support this drive program, how you can have more incubator space like Blue Sky Labs. And so I think that's just critically important. If you have people who are just sort of operating on their own and not in a collaborative fashion, it's never going to work.
Right.
You know, you mentioned investment and support from the local government, and curious about NIH funding and how important that is, you know, from support from the federal government as well. How important is that to MassBio?
You know, it is critically important when you think about our ecosystem in Massachusetts. And I talked about the number of academic institutions and research hospitals. That early innovation is the most important. It's the lifeblood of our entire ecosystem. That's where all of the magic starts. And in Massachusetts, we're the #1 per capita recipient of NIH funding, 3rd overall, 2nd to California and New York. I mean, 3rd, those are the first 2, but #1 per capita. And so to think that that could be jeopardized is truly, truly, disheartening, right? And not just for that early stage innovation, but for the clinical trials too, right? And I think the uncertainty around it right now is concerning, particularly to our ecosystem, because everyone's kind of in a holding pattern now, right? So we did submit an amicus brief in support of the lawsuit that's happening in Massachusetts.
How do you deal with the messaging? I know this has been something that our pharmaceutical clients struggle with, where the drug companies have made a lot of money, but they spend a lot of money on R&D. Drugs are certainly getting more and more expensive, but having the consumer understand these things don't just pop out of the ground. These are years of research, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. How hard is it to create messaging for folks to understand, both elected officials and consumers?
It is a huge challenge, right? I think there's historically been a few bad actors that have given the industry a bad rap. But what this industry is about is changing the lives of patients. And look, it's a really hard industry. We heard it today in the keynote. 90% of companies fail. Right? And that doesn't mean that science wasn't good and there was an opportunity. They ran out of money and they ran out of time, right? So you talked about, I mean, on average, it takes 10 years and $1-2 billion to get
it's a crazy number.
A drug to patients. And so, and science is really hard, right? And so it's hard to communicate that with just the general public. I think when you can get a CEO of a biotech who you can feel the enthusiasm and passion off of them, it helps to better tell that story.
I agree.
Right?
Getting them out front.
And that's what we try to do. And look, I have the best job in the world. I get to be a vehicle for storytelling for my 1,700 member companies and share the passion that these people have. They've dedicated their career to changing the lives of other people. And as we heard from John Crowley today, right? What is biotechnology? Well, it's a big word for hope, right?
That was a great line.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, our conference actually in Massachusetts is called the State of Possible, because I think that the innovation that these companies are working on make something that's impossible possible for patients.
Yeah, you think about science and how difficult it is, and anything that's just an impediment to another industry, to the life sciences industry, it's tenfold an impediment.
Exactly. And I get it. That's a hard thing from an investor perspective to think about investing there. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around just as a, layperson who's not involved in the industry. But when you're in it, you see it every day. And you see how hard, these men and women work in the industry, and they're taking big risks. But man, when it works, think about it. And we're seeing curative therapies that are happening now. I mean, that changes. Think about the sickle cell population. They had no therapy, and now they've got essentially a curative therapy. It's amazing.
It is amazing. It really is. Well, Kendalle O'Connell, President and CEO of MassBio, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for what you all are doing with SCbio. I think it's, down to the accelerator program and being kind of a mentor in that area. So we appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for having me and doing what you're doing, putting a good spotlight on the great work that this industry does.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.